Everybody. Sally, did you want to begin?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start, although I have to say my mind is like filling up with thoughts that were embellished or planted by the services and then the Zoom sessions and listening to everybody. And I was actually scribbling some notes during the last session because there were so many things that came in that tied into what we're going to be sharing in this hour about social justice. So it may seem a little disjointed because it's all coming together as we're doing this. But I'm glad you're all here. And some of you are going to be very familiar with some of the things that we're sharing. And for some of you, it may be new. I think a lot of the value of our being together is just being together and then hearing people's comments and reactions and putting all that together for how we move forward as a community. So with that, I just want to mention that in addition, I can't see everybody's face, Rabbi Joseph's face I can see Robin McAlpine, who co-chairs, hi Robin,
Hi.
who co-chairs Social Sisterhood Social Action with Susan Berniker, and I can't see whether Susan is on or not, but
she's there.
There she is. Yay.
But can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. I have two computers up, one that's bad and one that's not good. So wait, let me just try one thing to see if you can still. All right. You sure you can hear me? Then I'm going to stop talking. Okay. Hi, everybody.
So I just wanted to mention at the beginning that that we're a community, and as much as we can share the efforts of everybody in our community and work collaboratively and within our Beth Israel community and also with our partners, other partners locally and nationally, that adds to our strength. So I am going to go into screen sharing mode. And I thought that this was a beautiful prayer from the RAC. And it was a reminder of me to mention that the RAC, which is the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, has been really, really helpful in all of the work that we've been doing. So if people want to unmute and say this together, we can. Rabbi, you can lead us.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'natan lanu izdanut litaken et ha'olam.
Okay. So blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, for giving us the opportunity to mend the world. And one of the things I think that has really come to me so clearly is that while this past year we've been feeling a sense of loss in so many ways, we've had a lot of tears, we've felt very vulnerable, and we continue to feel vulnerable as the new year begins, that we also have a lot of opportunities to support each other in ways that we didn't in the past, or with a greater intensity than we've had in the past. So let's go right into talking about some of the things that we have been doing. Oops. And I am on the wrong screen. So I'm now going to show you how to get to the social action content on the Beth Israel website. So under community, we're going to go to social action. And is this visible for everybody? Okay. So one of the important activities of the social action committee is that we are the stewards of the tribute funds, the donations that come into our two funds on an ongoing basis. And it's the Social Action Committee that makes recommendations to the Board of Trustees about how those funds should be allocated. So we have a social action general tribute fund and a social action food fund. And we definitely felt a sense of urgency in the last few months to make sure that we were using those funds very thoughtfully and wisely, that we were getting the money out expeditiously, and that we were directing the allocations to organizations that pivoted their activities to meet the immediate needs in our communities and to immediate needs worldwide. So I wanted to share what we've been able to do just since the beginning of the pandemic. So for the months of July, August, and September, we had approximately $10,000 in our food fund to allocate. And we made the recommendation to the board and it was approved. These allocations were approved to support these four agencies locally: Lift Urban Portland, Sunshine Pantry, Urban Gleaners, and the Northeast Emergency Food Pantry, because these organizations were all stepping up in huge ways and serving much greater numbers of clients and needy people than they had prior to the pandemic. And we also looked to serve populations that were geographically diverse in our community, and that populations that were serving children, families, undocumented community members, sort of the whole spectrum of people in need in our community. We also made a donation to the RAC to support the civic engagement campaign that we've been involved in, Every Voice, Every Vote. And similarly, earlier in the year, we had significant amounts in both of our funds, in our food fund and our general social action tribute fund. And we use the same criteria, same thinking to make allocations to organizations, both that were serving, that were involved in hunger relief, but also some organizations that had expanded needs due to the pandemic. And I'll just comment on 3 of these. We made a fairly large allocation, large with respect to the amounts in our fund, to HIAS. And one of the things HIAS started doing at the beginning of the pandemic was to supply hygiene and medical aid to people in refugee camps around the world. And in addition, HIAS, for the first time in their history, started spending money and working on programs in the United States to meet the needs of refugees who were in camps inside or in facilities inside the United States. CODA, which is a drug treatment program, asked us for an allocation for Narcan kits, which Narcan, as some of you might know, is an antidote to opioids and is a treatment for opioid, an immediate treatment for opioid overdoses. They were seeing a huge increase in relapses and in use of opioids, and they wanted to make sure that to the greatest extent possible, their population that were vulnerable to opioid overdoses had available an antidote to treat those overdoses. And Rose Haven Day Shelter for Women and Children, which is located just a few blocks from our Beth Israel campus, pivoted their activities, which normally would take place inside, to serve a huge community of women and children living on the streets, and they revamped their services so that they could deliver street side, curbside services to that population. So I'm going to stop right there and just ask if there's any questions about allocations and our tribute funds or comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
HIAS is one of those organizations that I do support, not greatly generously, but somewhat generously, and I think about it a lot, and I do support them monthly. Should I be redirecting those funds through Temple Beth Israel instead of doing it directly? Would it be in any way preferable for the temple?
I would definitely say no.
Okay.
I would say that, anytime that there's sort of an intermediary, a handling, that it may slow down your dollars getting to where they need to be.
Okay.
I'm going to say yes and no.
Rabbi, do you want to comment?
I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to say it depends. I think this is actually a conversation that comes up often. We've talked about it in the committee, and I would say that yes, Sally is correct. If you're like, this is an organization that I want to support every month, that I want to direct my dollars, then you direct it directly. There's also a real positive in saying here, I send money to the Social Action Fund and there can be a large donation made in the synagogue's name, I think is really powerful. And that does speak to some donors. So I think especially over these past several months, when the needs have increased so much that some people have, said, I want to give donations to Temple and I want you to, get them out and, and to say again, in Congregation Beth Israel's name, here's a large donation to have that. So, I mean, I think you can do both. I think I think it just depends. I think what Sally's pointing to is clearly there's a different level of paperwork, bureaucracy, you know, in an institution that's large like ours, as opposed to you just putting in your credit card and immediately doing that. So, but I'd say both. Andy, do you have a?
You know, I think it is a 6 and 1, half dozen the other sometimes. I think if there is a campaign going on for a particular directed thing, I think early money is like yeast, I think is the Emily's List idea, where, you know, if people see other people donating, then they're more likely to, you know, chip in. I think like during the winter times when we've done drives for socks and boots and things like that, when you walk by the big containers and you see them with stuff in them, you want to put more in it. So that's my thought.
Yeah. And I think that was part of the impetus of saying, like, you know, look at these tens of thousands of dollars that we've been able to give out over the last several months. Let's keep that going. You know, so you're going to give to the Robert Peltz High Holiday Funds for Food Drive and, you know, keep giving to our fund so that we can keep giving it out.
And I definitely should have known better than to answer that question the way I did. It should have definitely been a yes and no.
Oh, I don't do that. I have a question. I guess I live along I-5, and there are so many people with nowhere to live, and it seems like we have this emphasis on food, and that's a very short-term thing. What kind of emphasis can we put on finding housing and mental health things for a lot of these people? I know, being in mental health, I have some people, they would rather live in a tent, but is there some place we could safely give them a tent place to live? There are other people that would really like to live somewhere. And you know, the food's good. I like to eat, but it's always nice to know where I can poop and have a shower too. And are there anything that we can do with social action that's directed in that direction?
Andy Olshan could give you some work to help build homes for people.
You know, I
Maybe
think
you'll
there's
put, Andy, will you put Cascaded Cluster also in the link? You can put stuff, go ahead, and then you can put in.
I will. I just wanted to say that the one thing that is going on that I think gives a lot of people hope is the R2D2 organization, which has been around for quite a while, has just taken over management of the 3 kind of tent camps. There's one at 6th and Gleason, and that's what they call the blended camp. There's a BIPOC camp on the east side at Water and Main, and then there's a Q camp right next to it at Water and Salmon. That's about 120 people that are living in tents, but they're in these intentional communities. And it's one of those things where the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty and the other parts of the faith community are not really getting engaged directly. And if they can, I think it will have a significant impact on taking what the city has done, which is a minimal effort. And before, especially in the next like 6 months, before the winter really hits us bad, you know, the folks in those situations need more support. And R2D2 has been a shoestring organization for a long time. And, you know, it's one of those things where there's no downside to supporting the R2D2 project because the money's not going in directly into the hands of the people there. It's going to pay for staff. It's going for, I mean, there are showers, laundry, food, other things that are going into those camps. But the R2D2 focus is to help these people identify what other particular issues they might have and help them transition into a better situation. So
I'm going to just follow up a little bit. Rebecca, you you led us into my kind of third topic that I wanted to discuss, but let's make it the second topic. As Andy mentioned, or he mentioned the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty, and Beth Israel is a member of the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty. And that group formed several years ago to, out of sort of people's feeling that we weren't making a headway in dealing with poverty. Yes, we were, doing some things to support homeless people. We were working in the areas of food insecurity, but we weren't getting to the root causes of poverty. The group came together and said, how can we make this work effective in changing the systems that are perpetuating poverty? And along with that work was also very closely tied in the work of looking at systemic racism and the systemic causes of racial inequalities. And so that group has been very active. And I would say personally, that has been a place where I have learned tremendously about systemic issues, local issues that have, set up these, the problems of poverty and homelessness to be, very intractable. And it's a place where you connect with other people in the community that are like-minded and really want to make a change for the better. So we do have some resources up on our website of programs that are being sponsored by the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty. And I will just mention in relation to homelessness, which Andy in our last, I think it was in the last session, said we have a humanitarian disaster on our streets, and I couldn't agree more. It's overwhelming. That the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty, starting last spring, did a soul searching, saying, we've been really focused on kind of trying to keep on the issue of poverty, and we don't know really whether tackling homelessness and the problems of the unsheltered are part of what we should be doing. And they took a look at it, and yes, that group is diving into the problems of the unsheltered population. So I would say for anybody who is really interested to start participating in the activities with the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty. The monthly meetings are listed on our website under our meetings and schedules. They're first Thursday meetings. And there's other activities that happen periodically. And starting just last week, a program discussion and listening opportunity started with the Interfaith, and it is an open group. You can join periodically. You can join for all the sessions. It's twice a week, and there are podcasts to listen to before each of the bi-weekly sessions. And if you want, you can just listen to the podcasts, or you can go full board and enter into all the discussions, or fall somewhere in between. But that's another thing that they're doing and that people might be interested in participating in. Robin, did you have anything did you want to, I thought you had a hand up or something. And I'd be happy maybe at the end to answer any questions about the Interfaith Alliance on Poverty. But I did want to change the subject now and talk about our civic engagement work. And I'm going to share So as a lot of you know and participated in, every voice, every vote is the Reform Movement's 2020 Civic Engagement Campaign, nonpartisan campaign. And the goal is to make sure that as many people as possible are able to participate in our democracy by voting. One of our major effort so far in this area has been to participate in the arm of this campaign, which is focused on combating voter suppression. And what we have done through the national movement is to partner with a group called the Center for Common Ground, which is also a nonpartisan group, a people of color-led group, which has expertise in combating voter suppression in states that passed laws after the repeal of the major mechanisms of the Voter Rights Act. When they were repealed in 2013, various states passed laws that went a long way towards disenfranchising primarily voters of color. With that introduction, I'm going to just share a little video that was put together by the Kaczynski family, which talks about the postcard campaign, and I think is an example of how people in our community participated, not only as individuals, but with their family members, with their neighbors, their friends, and contacts to join in this campaign.
Your vote is your voice and your power. Your vote can change the world and it matters.
Anyone want to see that one again? So We had over 60 households from Beth Israel that ordered postcards for Reclaim Our Vote through the RAC. And many more households participated because a lot of the people who ordered postcards shared them. Sisterhood did 2 parties for writing postcards and put out a lot of postcards. And as a congregation, we were responsible for writing, we did write 5,640 postcards. The Reclaim Our Vote campaign as a whole put out over 6 million postcards. And these postcards went to people of color, voters of color in 8 states that had a history of passing voter laws that were suppressive and particularly targeted voters of color. So I'm going to just stop right there. I just saw Josh Kaczynski come on. Josh, did you see your family's video? Good.
Sure did.
Okay, good. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions about our civic engagement work.
I think people can you can put questions in the chat we can look for. And if you want to give Robin and Susan an opportunity, since we are running short on time, as always.
Okay.
We have our wonderful, it is a bizarre, we'll talk about it another time, but we have our social action work of Beth Israel, of which Sally is the chair of that committee and that work. And we have auxiliary organizations. And one of those auxiliaries is the Beth Israel, the women of Congregation Beth Israel and the Beth Israel Sisterhood, who also have social action. And we've been working, been trying to work more closely together over these past several years because of the leadership of Susan Berniker and Robin McAlpine. So glad that you could be here to share some of that with everyone.
Okay, hi, I'm Robin McAlpine, and I'm going to talk about some of the stuff we've done in the past year and then what's on the ground right now coming up for us. You know, you may know about the Brit Olam, which was the covenant that so many Reform congregations joined in around social action activities, and one of them is reproductive justice. And in case you don't know, reproductive justice is different than reproductive rights. They actually changed the name right at the beginning of the year because reproductive rights is a very white-centered way of talking about, I want to have my reproductive rights. Reproductive justice has to do with everyone, including women of color or people who identify as women, being able to access any kind of reproductive health. Their access to it is not the same thing as our white women's ability to get it. So reproductive justice is the focus. We did a reproductive justice Shabbat that was a Friday night service and then a Saturday morning Torah study led by Rabbi Joseph, who did an incredible job bringing up all this really interesting information out of the Torah on the Jewish perspective on when life begins and the responsibility of the woman and what the responsibility is to the fetus. It was amazing reproductive justice Shabbat that we did. Another thing that we've done is we joined period.org, which is an organization that was founded here in Portland by 2 16-year-olds when they learned about period poverty, which is, I'm going to put the links up to everything I'm talking about as soon as I'm done talking. But period.org is amazing, has handed out millions and millions of menstrual supplies to people all over the world who need them. You know, the statistics of girls who miss school because they can't access period supplies is astonishing. So if we ever want to have a more equitable world, girls need access. People who need menstrual supplies need access to menstrual supplies. So the Social Action Committee already had a relationship with the Somali Council. So we went off of that, and Susan and I started working with a woman from the Somali Council here in Oregon. You may not know, there are 15,000 Somali refugees in and around the Portland area. So we've had an ongoing drive, you might have seen, to bring menstrual supplies there. If you are interested in doing that, we can give you our addresses. You can drop them off at Susan or my house or Debbie Bramer's house on the west side, or I'm going to put my information up there. And the easiest is really to Venmo me or send me menstrual supplies through Amazon or your preferred provider, and I take them to the Somali Council about once a month. We've given them probably 3 SUVs full of menstrual supplies because it never ends, as you know. And another thing that's going on is, like Sally mentioned, we did the 2 postcard writing parties. And now, you know, the focus has changed, right? We were just on the get out the vote thing, but then the wildfires happened. So I work with a group called Mom Block to supply supplies to people affected by the wildfires. If you are interested in learning about that, last Saturday, I drove down a truckload down to Medford because Medford is really, really needy. They really need supplies, and they're really struggling because the shelters that have been set up for evacuees are full, and the police have ticketed and pulled down the tent refugee camps that are in the park and told them their only option is to go to this one shelter that's run by a Christian organization where you have to pledge to study Christianity for 2 years. So they're in trouble down in Medford. So any way you want to help with that, you can get in touch with me and I can give you information on the ground about that. Another thing that I'm going to put up in a minute is to sign up to work the National Voter Assistance Hotline when we get closer to the election. These are ongoing trainings that you sign up for. They're free, and then you can work from home to be a voter assistance hotline person. So I'm doing my training next Saturday morning, but they've got like one every single day you can sign up for. I'll put the link up there. Another great organization working on food poverty here that I learned about when I did the trip down to Medford is called Feed the Mass. They've been feeding the protesters, and they feed people out of St. Francis Church on the east side. So I now drive for them, and I do a Tuesday drive. I pick the boxes up, all COVID cool, pick them up, take them to a shelter, a domestic violence shelter, and I have that shift every Tuesday. But they need ongoing drivers on an as-needed basis. So I'm going to put the link to that up. If you ever have a free day, or you can just get on the list so that they'll say, okay, we need drivers on Monday at 3, or we need a driver on Tuesday at 2. And so if you want to drive up, sign up for that and just drive as an ongoing basis to get them to shelters and to needy families. As we all know, it's going to get worse and worse, the food poverty in this town. So that's one way to help. And lastly, maybe some of you joined us, but there's quite a few of us here that were in the Wall of Moms this summer and were active on the streets. I see a couple of my sisters I joined arms with on here. And we were gassed a lot of times on the streets of our own city this summer. And so we've got to work on systemic racism, and we've got to work on it in this town. It needs to come from Portland. And the first thing I would really like to see is a Black Lives Matter banner on the synagogue, like we had an LGBTQ banners, and we've stood up for many things. I think we need a Black Lives Matter banner at the front of this synagogue, and I would love for that to start from Social Action, maybe I don't know what we need, a petition or what, but anybody who would like to spearhead that with me or make that happen, I think it's really important. We have a lot of Jewish families who have relatives who are Black, who are married to Blacks, and we understand what's going on with the racism, and I hope you'll join me in that. That is that's my stuff. Susan Berniker is going to finish up.
Can I just inject one thing? If folks want to come on to our build site, we've got lots of black paint and lots of plywood. If you wanted to make it simple, feel free. We're on Capitol Highway. Give me a call. Be happy to help.
I like the subversiveness that is.
I got it.
And we also have a number of Black Lives Matters banners, plaques right on our site. Anyway.
Yeah, well, following that, I will just say that on October 6th at 7:30 p.m., the CBI Sisterhood Social Action Group meets, and this is an issue that we will be talking about. It's our next steps. So I'm kind of talking backwards, but I hope that everybody's charged by this issue that Robin just brought up and Andy followed in with, because that is something that's of great importance to us. But I'm going to move back a little bit because I'm here to kind of talk about, as Beth Israel Sisterhood Social Action, just letting people know that we're part of a larger group. We're part of the Women of Reform Judaism, which is 65,000 women strong, and they we're the primary women's organization in the Reform Jewish movement. We represent, again, over 65,000 women. We advocate for social justice, raise funds for charities and rabbinic scholarships, and also educate congressional leaders. As I read that, I do want people to know that as we speak, as the clock is ticking, the conversations going on in WRJ very much focus on inclusion, inclusivity. So our language is learning to be, we're here for women, for people who identify as women. Being inclusive is very important, and it's one of the reasons why I feel comfortable being part of this group. I also feel really comfortable being involved with Women of Reform Judaism, and it kind of dovetails with the sort of how I've been feeling the past 4 years. But I feel like when women are labeled as nasty, it's very impactful to be with a large group of women and to carry that banner proudly and that energy proudly. So it's kind of a special place to be part of. The Women of Reform Judaism is broken down into districts, and we are the Pacific District. And in terms of social action, we have a social action Pacific District group that meets, which our congregation is involved with. One of those things we did this summer was the Pacific District had a panel on, the topic was white fragility and having the uncomfortable conversations around this issue. And we had a good turnout. Thank you, Robin is holding up the book. We had the author of White Fragility, her colleague, who is also named Robin, is an active member of the Jewish community in the Seattle area and a diversity trainer. So she spoke and gave us a lot of insight, answered our questions from a Jewish perspective on the issue. And that's something also we can put out, because it's worth seeing that talk. I'll try to get a link to it or get that out to people. Our congregation followed up with that a couple weeks later with Rabbi Joseph hosting a Zoom meeting where we continued the conversation, and Rabbi Joseph put us in some breakout rooms where we got to have really intimate discussions about when we first experienced racism, which was eye-opening to all of us. So that is something that we are working on now. And like I said, we meet monthly, the first Tuesday of the month. So it's October 6th. We meet from 7:30 to 8:30. We've always been on Zoom. Even before COVID started, we meet by Zoom. I hope you can join us. We'll be actually talking about our next steps. Now that we have this great summer conversation, we'll be looking at ways to be more involved and see if we can get that flag hanging over, over the dome of our synagogue, or what we can do that makes an impact. Have I left anything out? Oh, there's a Women's Pacific District Conference. We hope people will attend. October 24th and 25th. And usually it's, travels around and would be in San Diego in a normal year, but it's going to be on Zoom, so everybody can attend without cost.
Couldn't unmute myself. I appreciate Robin's pushing, reminding us of where we should head in ways. I wanted to expand on what Susan was saying, and the conversations that we're hoping to have that began in sisterhood and began with this reading of White Fragility and this conversation, and that the hope is to broaden this to the larger congregation. I'm not speaking out. I think we've talked about is that this is a larger congregational conversation, and yes, we should have Black Lives Matter banner, and that this should come up. I mean, it's a little bit ironic since we're not in the building right now, and we should still, as people walk by and see and understand the values that we stand for, that is definitely part of this. And so if you identify as a woman and want to be part of WRJ Beth Israel Sisterhood and that meeting next week, also the Social Action Committee meeting is also next week on Wednesday at 3. Is that I don't know what day of the week, what's the date?
Wednesday.
The 7th?
Wednesday.
I just didn't know the 7th of October. How are we in October? I still think it's like March. So the 7th of October is the general meeting as we're sort of planning the steps forward. Sally, was there?
Yeah, I really wanted to mention that the Social Action Committee is open to everybody in the congregation. You don't have to be asked to join. We would love to have as many people participate as possible.
And I just wanted to say, I was thinking of, and I said, I'm sure there'll be more questions. And as we're transitioning from these sort of pseudo times, going into this service at 3, which you can click on it whenever, but we don't want to overlap too much, sort of out of respect for the times that we set out. But there is, as we've all been sort of reflecting on Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life, and especially her ties to Judaism, and justice, how you pursue, hung in her chambers. And, it's the one that we know most famously, which comes from Parshat Shoftim in Deuteronomy. And interestingly, just reminded of this yesterday, is the end of that Torah portion actually is also a really, what I think is probably one of the most important teachings in our tradition. It's something I actually wrote about to get into rabbinical school, and it just sort of came back to me again. I haven't thought about it in a long time, where there are these questions in the same Torah portion about what do you do if you see your neighbor's ox that's gone astray, and it's all this stuff about what do you do, if there's lost property or different things. And it says, of course you have to return it, because the commandment is you cannot remain indifferent. Lo tuchal lehitalem. You cannot remain indifferent. And it goes on with an example of finding a body in a field and not knowing how this person died, why they died, where they were from, or anything like that. And the text goes to great length of saying it doesn't matter how that person died, who they're related to, where they were. You cannot remain indifferent. It's your responsibility to take care of this body. And they actually the rabbis actually measured from where they found the body to the closest town to see who would then take the responsibility. And as we're talking, especially today, all about this collective responsibility, I think it is such a powerful, powerful lesson. And in the context of social justice, social action, and what we're doing, is that we are all responsible. We're even responsible after the fact. So, right, we didn't do anything, we didn't physically do anything to hurt this person, but after the fact and finding it, we take responsibility because somehow we didn't provide enough hospitality, we didn't do what we were supposed to do, that this person perished somewhere in our midst. And so it's lo tuchal lehitalem, that we cannot remain indifferent to the suffering. We can't remain indifferent to the suffering when it's happening, and we can't remain even after the fact when we're looking back. So I think that just to sort of close this out as we go into, the last few hours of this day, to think about ways in which we engage, that we are not indifferent to what's happening, because we also get so desensitized, so overwhelmed. There's endless need, that we still cannot remain indifferent. And so I know we're all plugging in lots of different ways. One of the things I said before is that, we are planning, in the future, we'll have an opportunity to really showcase everything that our congregants are involved in, because so many of you are running organizations and engaged in these activities that we should all know about, and make sure that message gets out, to a broader population. So I appreciate everyone who could be here for this. I appreciate so much the leadership of Sally. Thank you so much. And so much appreciate, Susan and Robin for leading us all and keeping us on that path, of engagement, involvement, and certainly not the opposite of indifference. So thank you all, and continue in our day together. Gamar Tov, we'll just keep saying it, and it is good to be together. It is good to see everybody. Thank you.